Welcome to today's episode of the Force of Nature podcast. Today's guest is John King, originally from Southland, but now based in Christchurch. He is an expert in holistic management and runs a company called Succession. Welcome, John. How are you today?
Oh, good, thanks, Conan. Good, and pleasure to be here. Fantastic.
I'm very excited to have you on. I've just finished reading your book, Curiosity, and it's very engaging, plenty of stories, and I'll probably be using that in my day-to-day going forward. Do you want to tell us a bit more about yourself and how you've got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. I'm one of those guys that hasn't come up through the system. You know, I've never ever got a job through an interview. So I'm one of those people that are self-made, right?
Yeah.
So what got me to where I am was a comment that put me on track for this was when I was at Lincoln. By an older lecturer called Graham Tate. He said 95% of problems on farms aren't technical or financial, they're social. They're to do with relationships and communication and trust, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that set me off on a different path. And then I came across Alan Savory's work with the holistic management.
Yeah.
And so that the decision-making process of that is what flipped me, because at the time I was doing a master's in adult learning and farm management. And what I saw with the holistic management was a process to help farmers change and work more closely with nature without losing any financial gains, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a complete package type thing. And what I didn't count on is that unlike a lot of other parts of the world, like Australia, it rains in New Zealand, so that covers an awful lot of our sins. So the pickup of holistic management has been challenging. In a non-brittle environment, but the guys that are in the drier parts of the country certainly see a lot of benefits much faster, and that's because when you're in those brittle environments and you change your grazing and you change your other management practices, particularly around finance, then you start seeing benefits. And there are already lots of farmers out there that are doing similar kinds of things. Okay, but what this does is bring a whole package together. So that's what holistic management is about. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to give us kind of the fundamentals of holistic management for those that don't know?
Yeah. So it's a decision-making framework. You know, people focus on the grazing management as if that's all there is, but there's a lot more about it. So what it does is that it essentially asks you, what are you trying to do with your time? And one of the simplest things you can do to really get a grip on that is to have a farm map of what your property's going to look like beyond the next generation. So there's a sense of continuity around what you're contributing to. And then as a family, what you do is when you've got a decision or an action or a policy to put in place, you run it through some context checks, okay? And that tells you whether it's going to take you closer to that or whether it's going to take you away from it, okay? And then you can create contingencies around that to get you on track. So, in a nutshell, that's what it's essentially about. And a lot of it is really about how can you find your unfair advantage by using nature to reduce inputs and other costs, okay? Because if you can do that, that steps you off the inflation cycle.
Absolutely.
And so that's really what holistic management does. And it helps families come together because it helps you get on the same song sheet, and it helps you work together as a team because of the structured way of the decision checks that you look at when you are evaluating, what you're going to do in the future. Okay, so that's what it's all about. And it makes you also recognise that your farm isn't an isolated entity.
Yeah.
That if you want to be able to do particular things on your farm, how does the community need to behave to make that happen? And what might be the role for you beyond your farm to actually make that happen? So there's a lot of other little bits and pieces in there as well that get you thinking about the bigger picture, other than just Joe Blogs trying to make ends meet, that kind of thing. So it gets you to really take on leadership roles and within your family, but also into the community to help make things work better for your family. So yeah,
that's awesome. So kind of clearly defined roles, both community-wise and within your family business.
Well, there's those are the things that emerge through the process. Okay, So it's not something that there's no recipes in
No.
managing holistically, right? It's systematic, but it's not a system.
Yeah.
Okay, which confuses people, right? So what that means is that you work through your own answers. You create your own answers through the process. Okay, it's the original form of AI, right?
Yeah.
So it's about you asking questions and getting answers that suit you to move forward, and that's where the benefits come from. So
essentially understanding your context and working out where you want to go.
That's it, being in control. That's exactly right. How do you take control back for you, okay, and focus on the things that you can make a difference with and working from there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I watched one of your videos on financial management and how kind of flipping the model on that, and that was taking that control. Could you kind of speak to that at a higher level, I guess, is probably...
Yeah, I mean, it's what we're saying there is that profit is intentional.
Yeah.
Right, okay? The traditional way of profit is, this is how much income we have, this is how much expenses we're going to need, profit's what falls out the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And I say, that's not terribly sexy, right?
No.
So what you want is, the other way around is be a bit more like a corporate, okay? And that is, once you figure out what your income is and determine your profit, and what's left over is going to cover your expenses. And then instead of using your tax categories to prioritize your expenses, we focus on three lots. We want to focus on the expenses that are going to generate additional wealth. That's additional wealth. Okay, so that's more income or more pleasure in what you're doing or fun or that kind of thing, right? Or biodiversity or whatever, okay? That wealth stuff, okay? Secondly is to identify the expenses that you have no negotiation rights over, okay? So, because they're fixed expenses, you have to pay them anyway.
Yeah.
And that they might be legal things like rates, or they might even be moral things like young fellow like you's got some money off your grandma to buy a car.
Yeah.
Well, you make sure that she's first on the list when it comes to paying things off with your next paycheck, right? That kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then everything else is what's known as the maintaining expenses. They're essential for the business, but they don't grow additional income. And what we're looking for is opportunities within those expenses to shift money further up the ladder, particularly either into your cash, either your profit or your cash surplus, or into those wealth-generating expenses, and finding that within the business, okay? And so that means that you don't have to go to the bank to grow your business, okay? And you might use, examples of around, different categories to get more emotional equity into your planning. Might be categories like toys and development, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that might be a category that you set a certain amount aside to that might be your wealth generating category, for example. Is what you might call it.
Yeah.
Or another category might be instead of fertilizer, you might call it fertilizing. So it's anything to do with the shift of fertility on your property. So it might include the purchase of fertilizer, but it might also include the labour and time that you need to, say, use your livestock to shift fertility around your pasture, or to use bale grazing, for example, okay, and do that instead. So, because all those things are about bringing fertility onto your property, right? Yep. So that's about fertilising, okay? That's what in the first story in my book there, by a guy called Rick Cameron, right? One of the first things he talks about is, how do he change those categories to get more emotional equity in his financial planning. So I think that's missing in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I think doing it that way would be kind of more rewarding because you know what you're working towards. You've set out some goals around it, whereas you're not worrying about, geez, I don't know how much is going to fall out the bottom this year.
That's it.
And then that decides how much fun or what development I can do going forward.
That's it. Now be mindful about that. When you identify how much profit you're going to get, doesn't necessarily mean
Guaranteed.
You're going to get it.
No.
Okay. But what it does is it creates that sense of intent. This is what I want. How can I work as hard as I can to make that happen to the best of my ability? Yeah.
And that informs your decisions on the day-to-day, doesn't it?
That's it. That's it.
That's a cool way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
You've just spoke briefly about fertilising, and everyone knows how to use a fertiliser truck, but moving it around with livestock, what's been your experience or some of the cool things you've seen with some of the farmers that you've worked with?
I think one of the interesting things is that I think we've lost our premiership in the globe regarding grazing management, right?
Yeah.
And I think that came up last year in the Brougham lecture, where I think it's Dr. Dave Chapman from Ag Research pointed out that that all the productivity gains in the dairy industry over the last 40 years have been solely due to nitrogen. Mm-hmm. And he talks about suboptimal grazing. You know, this is an industry that for 40 years has been telling farmers to graze at the 3-leaf stage, and nobody does it. Okay,
exactly.
The industry has farmers panicking so much about quality. They're always grazing at the 2 or the 2.5-leaf stage, which perpetuates the need for regrassing within 4 or 5 years. You know,
exactly.
This kind of thing, right? So that's what's largely missing, and so again we can use grazing management. So if we get on top of grazing management, then you can get on top of pasture renovation. Okay, if you get that right. Okay, the other things you can do is you can use livestock to shift fertility around your property. And I talk about this in my book too. There was a property I visited, and it was one of these places that, you know, had irrigation, fancy, all the fancy gear around fencing, fancy new pastures, lots of fertilizer, overseas contracts, you know, primo, okay? Yeah. And we're driving along on the dryland side of the property, and the guy pulls up and goes, "You won't believe this." He says, "I put my ewes on here 5-6 years ago, okay, on this postage stamp, and I can still see the difference 5-6 years later," right?
Yeah.
And I'm going, "Fantastic. Have you done it since?" And he goes, "No." I said, "Have you done it anywhere else since?" And he goes, "No." And he was talking about, you know, how the Lincoln scientists had suggested he do this. And I said, you realise, I said, what if you'd done this for, I don't know, 150 nights, 200 nights a year for the last 5-6 years? You'd have 1,000 to 1,200 times this area looking like this.
Yeah.
Okay, because there was an obvious difference. Okay? Yeah. And it was 6 years they'd been doing it, right? Had done it, right? And I said, if you'd done that, it hasn't cost you a bank loan, a resource consent, you know, engineer's report. You haven't had to subscribe to electrical and plumbing services.
Yeah.
Okay. And all it's cost you is an overhead, the shepherd's wage.
Yeah.
I said, "Which you're going to pay for anyway." I said, "You name another business that wouldn't give its left testicle to grow inventory, okay, pasture,
yeah,
okay, with an overhead."
Exactly.
Okay. This is the unfair advantage of farming. Okay. And this goes right back to the 40s when there was a guy running around called Peter Sears. He was an agroecologist. Mm-hmm. And he talked about night and day grazing. And this is how they were using animals to lift the fertility across properties. Was that when you put the animals in a smaller enclosure at night, they concentrate their day in, because the first thing they do when they get up in the morning is like everybody else, right? They go and have a crap and a good look round.
Yeah.
And so that puts the fertility right where you park them overnight. And then you give them the rest of the paddock for the day. And that's how you shift fertility around. And all it costs you is the shepherd's wage.
Yeah.
You know, and a bit of meat for his dog, you know, exactly. Or her dog, right? That kind of thing, right? So you know, we've lost those principles. That's what's missing today. I mean, if farmers did more of that, then they wouldn't need to have so much fertilizer.
Yeah.
Because the problem with fertility on the farm isn't that you haven't got enough, is that it's shifting from the middle of the paddock to the shelter belt, to the trough, to the gateway, to the high point, to the campsite, to the hay rack. That's where it's the salt block rack. Okay, that's where the fertility is shifting to. Mm. But if you've got your stock density, then the animals can't all park on one space. So that fertility moves out to the middle of the paddock, or particularly on the side of a hill. You know, the old girls won't like it that you park them up there overnight, but that's what you got to do to get your fertility up, because that's what lifts the fertility up across the whole property. Absolutely. And the guys that are running 10,000 or more stock units in one mob, they all talk the same thing. They all say, you know, my grandfather's running 30 or 40 mobs, and you know, we end up with all the fertility in different parts of the paddock. But by doing this, we even the fertility right across the whole paddock without any subdivision. Mm. If we're all sheep, we don't need to fence off the waterway, so it's all natural water. So there's no water system that you've got to invest in. Yeah. Okay. And you got to remind farmers that, you know, 80% of the nitrogen that the animal uses goes through it, 100% of the potassium, and probably 80 to 90% of the sulfur and the phosphate go through the animal. Okay? It comes out the other end, you know. Talking to a guy, and he had a mob of well over 10,000 sheep, and we calculated that his animals were squeezing out on 2022 prices, so right at the top end, right?
Yeah.
About 4.5 grams worth of nutrients a day.
Jeez.
That was 1.6 million a year.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, compared to his fertiliser bill, you know, it just dwarfed it, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
He doesn't tell you that. You won't get that from a fertiliser executive or a prep, you know what I mean? They don't tell you about that stuff. They don't show, if they're quoting kilograms of dry matter per hectare for their, you know, or cents for the fertiliser that you're paying for, they won't deduct the amount that clover contributes to that, or the bacteria, or whatever else earthworm slime currently is 45% nitrogen. Who want to pay for urea, So, I mean, that's the thing, is that they don't deduct all that stuff. They expect that all that grass that you're going to grow is going to be due to the fertiliser, when in fact, it might only be the last 25%.
Yeah.
So, no one talks about that, No one talks about that.
No. And we start seeing a little bit of talk about that free nitrogen from clover, but we don't really hear about that nutrient recycling from our livestock. And talking about that fertiliser only being that last little bit, there's a good story in there from Barry Riddler, I think it is, about that point where you're paying that extra $1 of urea might actually not be getting you any more grass growth. So, and it's a lot lower than what people think where that point is.
Yep, exactly.
And most people don't realise that by chucking on another round of 50 kgs of urea, they're actually spending more money than they're getting back from it. So
That's it. And that's the beauty. Barry's got that program there, E2M.
Yeah.
And it just smokes Farm Max.
Yeah.
And by the way, it smokes Overseer as well, right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing. This is that you've got innovators like that out there that have been ignored by the industry, Barry in particular, for 2 decades.
Yeah.
This AI will pinpoint for you what's right for your business, and it will do it in seconds.
Yeah.
And it'll give you a half a dozen options in 30 seconds, that kind of thing, right? See, Farm Max can't do that.
No.
Okay, you've got to reload it.
Plug in
the skill of the operator.
Answers, yeah.
Yep. And chances are it's down to the operator experience about what's going to be the answer anyway.
Yes, exactly. And I guess their viewpoint on what they understand the farm system and what should work.
Yeah.
Which will probably be an industry average. So
that's the thing, is that everything is averaged, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I was talking to one guy that had used Barry's program, and he said, we were chatting away about our tutus. He says, we weren't sure we were giving them enough energy in October. And we never mentioned this to Barry, he said, but Barry's program pointed it out to us.
Yeah.
And told us how much energy it was actually missing.
Yeah.
And that's what flipped us. He says, that was something that we hadn't mentioned to Barry, didn't see it coming. Boom, there it was right in front of us.
Yeah.
And Barry half the time doesn't know the outcomes, because this is the AI stuff. It does it itself.
Yeah.
So he has to go back. He has to work backwards from the numbers to figure out how it worked out what it did.
Yeah.
And that's why you got like the Mathesons in here, for example. They're dairy farmers running 800 cows, and they said, when we did his program, we've now got the confidence to tick down to 800 cows. I think we're 750.
Yeah, it's come back a fair bit.
Yeah. And they had the confidence to do that because of what his program was showing regarding all the other things they were doing. They said they could do that. They didn't have to go and graze lambs on the property to try and generate additional income for feed that they would have to pump into their cows, all that kind of stuff. So it made life simpler for them. And but the industry doesn't want to know about that kind of scenario,
No.
So it's really frustrating. And you've got to realise, Dave Cameron has a great quote there. He says a lot of the problems that are out there are due to professionals presenting models to farmers to teach them how to farm. Yeah. And that's one of the dramas we have, is that a lot of those models are averaging everything. And the classic course is Overseer. Okay. And I say to farmers, I don't know of a single farmer that's supported Overseer, but if I go and talk to the industry, they'll all say, "Oh no, the farmers support what we're doing." And I'm going, hang on a minute. It took a judge in the Crown Court to ask the community of scientists and policymakers and professionals how unjust it was to impose penalties on farmers based on the technology that was out by up to 50%. And I said, if your bathroom scales were out up to 50%, what level of trust would you have in the technology, let alone the people that designed and developed it with your money?
Yeah.
Okay, because they keep pouring money into that thing, and it's still a lemon,
Yeah.
They'd be better off using Barry's program. Barry's program focuses on profit. Like he says, if you get your economics right, that reduces the environmental pollution because you're using only putting on what you're using. Whereas the industry, might be as much as 20% excess, which allows them to make more money, okay, and the farmer to make less.
Yeah.
Which is what Barry's program consistently shows.
Yeah.
So that's the drama we have with technology today in the industry, is that it's not there to really help the farmer.
Yeah, it's an incredible program. I definitely want to have a play with it myself, because I see this as the same issue, but I probably don't have the ability to work these things out with the numbers side of it. But I can see like profitability with farming, if you can minimise those inputs and only be using what you actually need.
Yep.
And build a resilient system focusing on the ecosystem services, like you can actually be more profitable, not have as much strain on your system and your staff and your family and your finances, and you can get the outcomes you're actually looking for. But quite often people, let's say in dairy, will try and go for more cows thinking that they can make more milk. With that comes so much more extra cost that actually you might not get any more benefit from doing that, but a hell of a lot more stress. So
yes,
it's interesting that a system like E2M can't be picked up or commercialised, so it can be used by consultants to give the right outcomes for the environment, economics as a country and everything. So
that's right, Conor. It's a travesty, mate. It's an absolute travesty. That's it. So but that's the industry. The industry has an agenda.
Yeah,
and it's not this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and programs like that pick it up.
Yeah,
they lay it bare for the farm to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you showed that to more farmers, there could be a lot of environmental outcomes.
There'd be many environmental outcomes. That's the thing. Okay.
Yeah, there'd be probably a reduction in, let's say, Southland's pretty close to here. There'd probably be a reduction in cow numbers just through the fact that farmers will be realising that they're running higher stocking rates than they actually really need to. And they make more money probably with a lower stocking rate.
That's it.
It's just you need to be able to show them those numbers, and there's probably going to be that element. Do I make that shift? Because this goes against everything I know.
That's it. So that comes the issue is how do you develop that trust? To move in that direction. And there's a number of farmers out there that are already trying it. So there's plenty out there that are already doing it, but they're not shouting about it.
No,
you know what I mean. And fair enough, because it's scary.
Yeah,
it's scary, and in scary times. Scary things are even scarier,
Yeah.
So it's not an easy time to make it a change, but now's the time to obviously if your back's against the wall, now's the time you're going to have a go. Okay.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want to be doing it when prices are high and all the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
But no one ever wants to do it then because you want to let your profits run,
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a conundrum for the farmer, right?
Yeah.
How do I change to a new system when I don't see around me what I could be doing?
Yes.
And a lot of guys in this book are in that space.
Yeah.
Okay. So they talk about their journeys about we tried industry ideas. It didn't work for me. Right. Make quite clear. It didn't work for them. Right. Might work for other people, but it didn't work for them. Mm-hmm. And so what did they then do next to go and find the right answer for them? Okay. So there's always an epiphany that's something that flips them, okay? So it might be a drought, it might be financial crisis, might be a disease or something that goes through the animals or whatever, that kind of thing, or through the crop or whatever. Something flips them, okay? And then they realise, okay, well, and that challenges what they thought was true. And then they go looking for something else because they can't go back to the people that gave them the advice in the first place because it doesn't work in their situation. They've figured that out, okay? Yeah. They've got the evidence for that. So they then go looking for other people. And that becomes the harbour because you don't find those people in the media, right?
No.
You don't see them in the newspapers very often, okay, all that kind of thing, right? So where do you go? So everybody goes onto social media. Yeah. And there's the great thing about social media, there's no consultant tapping your shoulder all the time, you don't look at that, okay? Yeah. So, that kind of thing, right? So you're able to go and find what other people are doing, and that's where most of them start. And then they pick up information, they go to field days or whatever. They talk to other farmers in particular. And that's really, it's the farmers that actually shift the ideas around. Okay, it's not the consultants, it's the farmers.
Yeah, and I think there's always that thing that farmers are ahead of the scientists, that they're just catching up to what guys like in your book have been doing for 7 or 8 years. They hear about it and they go, oh, how do we do that? And then it gets reduced down and then it's the recipe again.
Yes.
Whereas you're taking all the context of how that person works in their system and what they're dealing with in a financial state as well, and then trying to apply it to every other farm that is relatively similar, which is going to have a multitude of different outcomes. So
yeah, it comes back to holistic management too. That's why people don't like it, because it's not a recipe.
Yeah.
So what it teaches is principles. You create your own recipes from the principles.
Yeah. People
don't get that. You know what I mean? And so that's what becomes the trouble, is that, and particularly dairy farmers struggle with that because they're so used to being told what to do. And that's really frustrating for me because, unless I had, because I'm saying that, crikey, if I knew what to do, and by that I mean if I took on that responsibility, I'd have to run the farm for you. I said, you couldn't pay me enough for that,
Yeah.
I don't want your stress. Okay.
Yeah.
So, the process allows you to figure out what's best for you in your time and space, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of it. Okay. And there's lots of people out there you can go and tap on the shoulder about, but what did you do in this situation? Or what did you do? That kind of thing. That's what you want to do. You want the farmers to go and talk to each other about what they've done. and they create their own friendships and trust based on that. That's, it's a bit like the NZI PIM, right? I was a member of them for years, and then they put out this survey just before COVID came out, and it was all about how do we, the enlightened ones, help the poor, stupid, ignorant farmers fix their problems, as if they couldn't fix their own and they couldn't share the ideas out. I just thought it was the most patronising survey I'd ever come across. Yeah, I've got no time for them now, right? Yeah, and I see they're now putting an accreditation up. So that's just going. Like I say to people, that's how do we police integrity? Okay, you can't police integrity. No, you can't. Okay, so it's someone with a piece of paper doesn't mean that they're going to give you all the right advice. I'm right up front. I'm saying I'm the consultant. You don't want to take my advice. Go and talk to a farmer. That kind of thing. So what I throw out are the principles, and then from there people can make their own practices, techniques, tools, whatever it is they need to move ahead.
Absolutely, and I think that's probably the one benefit of social media for farmers is that they can connect with these people all around the world that are doing things a little bit differently and have these conversations. Yeah. And then when they are eventually maybe travelling, they might actually get to go out to that farm and see it in real life. So I see there's been huge benefit in that. And you do see there's some farmers out there that have quite big followings because they are putting out everything they do, sharing the good and the bad and what's working and what's not. And there's just so much value in that. And you can't, like a consultant just can't gain that unless they're doing it themselves as well.
Yeah, I mean, you only learn from your mistakes.
Exactly. You've got to make mistakes to learn.
That's it. Really. That's it. I mean, you never learn from your successes. Kind of, take that one off. On to the next thing. No one ever reviews their successes. You only ever review your mistakes. Yeah. So that whole thing is that if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not learning. Yeah. And you're probably not changing. No. So the definition about getting older is that we're too scared to fail. Yeah. So we stop learning. And you start to stagnate. Yeah. So if you don't want to grow old, okay, you got to keep trying something new. Yeah. And to keep yourself fresh and just keep your brain. Even all those dementia studies and stuff show if you're in your 70s, there was that one program I watched a while back where if you're in your 70s, try learning 3 new things at once. And I don't know, a language, I don't know, computer stuff and something else, right? To draw or something like that kind of thing, right? And try learning those 3 skills at once, and that will improve your cognitive abilities. Yes, that's very kind of thing. So very interesting. That was on one of those BBC things. So really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's very important to be like a whole life learner as well. I get a lot of joy out of it, and I suppose with farming, there's so much you can learn. And for me as a consultant, I guess if I don't learn as much as I can and don't know about all these different things, then how can I actually serve the farmer? Yep. And how, if I was still farming, what would I actually be looking for? And that's kind of how I come at things. So right. We've spoken about your book quite a lot, but we actually haven't gotten down into like how you came to writing this book and what's it all about.
Yeah. So people have been saying, I've been promoting these ideas for years, right? And people are saying, oh, but no one's doing it, Yeah. Okay. And so I was, hang on, there's lots of people out there doing really interesting things that fit in with what I talk about. But they might be doing it as a package, but they're doing bits of it, Yeah. And I'm always amazed, I guess, about the wisdom that farmers bring, and the way they talk about things, the phrases that they use, and that kind of language. Yeah. That highlights a wisdom that you get from experience in life, right? Yeah. And that's why no one in the book's under the age of 35. Yeah. Okay. Because you need the last day that anybody's going to be interested in one of these ideas is the day they leave the university. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's why there's not very many people in Canterbury in this book, because they're so close to the university, right? Yeah. So there's so that's what I was so I wanted to get a number of case studies together about farmers and what they'd changed and their journey about what they'd changed. I remember colleague of mine in Australia, Graham Hand, talks about he met a dairy farmer and hadn't seen him for 3 years. And he came back to him and he said, he was surprised how well the farm was doing. And he asked the farmer, "Oh, what have you been doing? Because I haven't been here for 3 years." And he said, "Oh, I didn't listen to you." And it's always struck with me. It's a real Graham Hand sort of phrase that And I always thought we never give farmers enough credit about their own creativity and flexibilities.
Yeah.
And the holistic management processes allow farmers to really accentuate their own creativity. So the reason the book was there is that I put it there is that I'm seeing in my work daily, farmers, coming up with ideas that really dovetail into the holistic way of thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I wanted to do was to put all these case studies together, and for people to see the context in which the ideas evolved. Okay, so what was the epiphany that made them switch, and then what was the second epiphany that made them think, oh, I'm on the right track now. Okay, and there might be a third or even a fourth one dealing with changes as they grow their experience trying something different, right?
Yeah. So
that's what the book's largely around, and there's a few essays in there too from my time as a columnist for the New Zealand Farmer, and I was really lucky to get involved with that. John Morgan. When he asked me to do that, he said, I want to make it very, very clear that if you're going to put anything in here, if you're going to use that holistic stuff, it can't be anything wishy-washy. It's got to be science-based, but, boom, boom, And he liked the way that I wrote about it. Yeah. And, whenever I was being a critique of the system, of farming in New Zealand, I always put up a farmer that was doing something different. So there was always that opportunity to see, someone's doing something different. And John was really good. He'd allow me to put either my number at the bottom of the article or the farmer's numbers at the bottom of the article. So people didn't have to go through me; they go straight to the farmer. Yeah. Okay. You don't want to get like I said, you don't want to get the information from me. I'm the consultant, right? Go to get it from the horse's mouth. So that's what the beauty was with New Zealand Farmer. So I think they've just restarted up again recently too, but I imagine that it's not quite the same with John Morgan. So
no,
yeah,
things changed, don't they?
Yeah.
So how long did the book actually take you to put together all these different stories and case studies? Because
I've written there, is it? Well, it was some of the stories go back 15 years. I've written them quite a while back, but to really collate it all probably took the best part of a year.
Yeah.
And like a lot of the essays I've got in there, I just really altered the ones that I'd sent into stuff. So I had to get their permission that it was okay. I could reuse those in the book.
Yeah.
And then the rest were just from my time with RMPP, Red Meat Profit Partnership, and Beef and Lamb, running my small groups.
Yeah.
And just the properties we go and visit, and you just get these amazing farmers that were just doing stuff that they just thought, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing, blah blah blah, ho hum. But actually, there was some real genius in behind what they were doing. And I still keep finding farmers that are in that space, and they just think it's just normal, right?
Yeah.
But actually, the industry, if they went there, would be quite surprised. Yeah. And so that's where that those stories need to be told. So it's a book about farming and the environment and making money, but at the same time, it's also a social history, because it's explaining how farmers are challenging what they believed was true at that particular point in time regarding farming management.
Yeah. Okay.
And how that's changed over might be a number of years for some of them, and so that journey. So, and most of these guys are easy to find. They're on social media.
Yeah.
And the beauty about a book, of course, is that they don't see your face, so you're relatively anonymous.
Yeah.
So unless someone knows who you are at the pub, then chances are no one knows who you are. So
yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing, right? So there's a few there, but on Country Calendar and stuff. But Country Calendar looks at a different angle. It doesn't look at the hard-nosed business angle.
Yeah.
So that's where I come from, is looking at what's making money for these guys and what's not.
Yeah.
And are they happy?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the key thing, is at the end of the day, are you happy?
Yeah.
How many farmers are actually sitting there thinking deeply about, am I actually happy doing what I'm doing here? Am I happy with the way my farm system's running? Do I actually morally align with this?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably something that a lot of farmers probably haven't asked themselves, and they're just stressed. And
you don't until things go wrong, until the wheels fall off.
Yeah.
And then you go, well, how the hell did that happen?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's where a lot of these guys in the book started from. So it's that's how it works. That's the whole thing of life, is that you've got these journeys.
Yeah.
Where you come up against a brick wall, and you've got to find a way to burrow through it. So that's what the stories are all about in the book.
Yeah, that's a great read. I'll probably keep reading it over and over again, because there's just so many takeaways. And I feel like I could go and visit every single one of those farmers and just be amazed at everything they're doing. And like you said, a lot of farmers don't realise that they're doing something that might be a little bit outside the box, or they're doing something that's really good. They just think it's normal until another set of eyes come in and have a look. So, yeah, I think the work you're doing around like the discussion groups that you run as well is awesome. Like the small, for me, I always find that smaller groups work a lot better than big groups because that's when the real questions come out and the sharing between each other happens.
Yep. You get more intimacy.
Yeah.
I was on a property the other day and I'm in the ute with the farmer. The farmer goes, I'm in a discussion group, but we operate nothing like this.
Yeah.
And I'm going, because it's not focused on just production. We look at whole life issues here. And I'm saying it's more like having a bunch of friends around for a beer, okay? So you take the piss out of each other, okay, and then you get down and do something serious, and then you take the piss out of each other again.
Yeah.
And people are curious. That's why we're called curious cockies, right?
Yeah. We're
coming from a state of ignorance, like, what's worked for you? Tell us about your situation. What's worked for you? It's not, we're not coming with the answers. We're not coming to dissect the business. We're coming to have a look at what's working for you. And then what's not working for you. We can have a conversation about that as well, okay? And do that kind of thing. So, and it's interesting, a lot of the changes that farmers want to make are to do with interventions. I've got to purchase something to make my farm better. No one ever talks about, well, how do I change my management to make my farm better without having to purchase something? A bit like what I said a minute ago, but with the guy, just using the grazing management to lift the fertility. Yeah. And using that, in that particular instance, using the principle of accumulation, like the principle of interest, right? That's the same principle of accumulation. How do you use the grazing management to tap into that principle of accumulation, for example? Yeah. And so that's what's missing. When I come across, when we have like that review, quite often that's what we see is that, that they'll plant more trees or put another crop in or lucerne or rafno or whatever, that kind of thing. It's, the latest thing, that kind of story, right? Yeah. And I'm going, well, hang on, how's that addressing your management? Mark Anderson in here, for example, talks about, his realisation that grazing or lifting fodder beet wasn't addressing his grazing management problems. No. Now, he was surviving because of the crop, okay? But that was costing him. So it was kind of like, well, that's why he moved to bale grazing, to get rid of the crop, okay? And that gave him a couple of other options. One was that he had grass in the spring, because, you don't have that paddock out for 14 months, It's sitting there waiting to go in the spring. And it cost about the same as fodder beet, but he was bringing nutrients onto his farm. Exactly. And it changed the way that his soils functioned, okay? It lifted the infiltration rate, and that meant he was capturing more water. It also changed the dung on the animals, okay? So the dung was becoming more solid, which means if there was a rainstorm, it wasn't going to run down the nearest waterway. Yeah. Now, all these kinds of things were benefits from just doing that. And then you don't have the whole thing around shifting silt and all the rest of it you do with crops, that kind of thing. So, yeah, exactly. So, and quite often with fodder beet, there's almost a lot of tractor work that goes in after as well. So there's another huge cost to try and get that soil structure back. And then you won't get that back for a long term, depending on your grazing management again. So that's it. I mean, it's almost like a never-ending cycle. There's a couple of things. I mean, Simon Oswald makes the most fantastic observation when he says, you have to, as the soil gets tighter and you end up with that wall of golf balls in front of your para harrows, right? Yeah. He says you have to keep buying bigger and bigger equipment to smash it down. He says, and that comes with, uncosted overheads, which is usually bigger and bigger equipment. Jeremy Clarkson found that out when he bought his fancy tractor, right? Yeah. Only was it too big for his shed, it was too big for all his equipment, right? Yeah. Then he'd go and buy bigger equipment. That wasn't part of the budget. No. Okay, no one ever talks about that, right? No. So that's where that fits in, is that quite often when we get bigger, there's a whole lot of other costs that we haven't thought of that pop up as a result of making that change. So, bigger, harder, faster, the industry mantra doesn't always work. No, and I think there's like a perfect example is this of someone like getting a lease block to expand their operation. So they're expanding the area so they can run more stock, but they're not focusing on improving the land that they've already got. And exactly. There's a lot of associated costs. If the lease block's like an hour away, you're forgetting about all that time to drive there and back, petrol,
Maybe you need someone up there to manage the stock all the time, and you might actually end up not making any more money. Whereas if you focus on improving your soil and your ability to capture rain and get those roots down deeper, you can probably run just as many stock and
that's it.
For less overheads.
And then the thing is, crikey, I've only got a 3-year lease. I've got to make it pay.
Yeah.
So you pump all those resources into it, then a drought comes along.
Yeah.
Oops. So it increases your risk. No one ever talks about risk in business. And that's the drama, is that all those, crops and that kind of thing increase your risk. More machinery increases your risk.
Yeah.
So all that risk is never taken into consideration.
No.
It's kind of like and this, I was on a property a while back, and the guy said, the problem with dairy farming is the problem with the dairy system is that you plug in what production you need and you work backwards from there. It makes every year look brilliant.
Yeah.
So and then you have a flood or a drought or a windstorm come through or whatever, and you got to deal with that stuff. Or the price drops out of the blue, all that kind of stuff, and then you're kind of stuck, because you've got all this, because it's all front loaded costs.
Yeah.
So it doesn't come later. So it's that whole thing. You got to spend more to make money, but quite often what you get back is not what you were expecting.
No.
And staff member leaves, for example. Oh no, they were a good one. They've been there 5 years. Well, it's going to take 2 years to get the next person up to speed. What's that going to do to your bottom line?
Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of thing. So a lot of that isn't taken into consideration when people are looking at expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What have you, I guess, over your period of journey, what's been, I guess, the biggest change you've seen in, say, one farm? Has it been around their management and mindset? And has it gone from kind of the brink to just pumping out now?
Okay. I guess I think sometimes there are farmers that go off on a different tangent, for example.
Yeah.
And realise, John McRae's a classic, right? I haven't done any work with John McRae, right?
Yeah.
I've just been in and out of there a couple of times and seen what he was doing, because he was grazing chickens for a while, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And he was making more money from his chickens than he was from his sheep, so he got rid of his sheep, right?
Yeah.
Even surprised his accountant how much money he was making. Like, he was making oodles, right?
Yeah.
But his business now is farming people. He has Bite Glen do it at Wanaka.
Yeah.
Okay. And he talks about the epiphany about that. He had Joel Salatin there, the American entrepreneur. And Joel ran a day there. There was 120 people there. I remember the day, and he sat Joel down in the morning, and the following morning in the wool shed, and said, "Look, this is my debt. What would you do in this situation?" And Joel says, "Well, how many people go past your gate?" And John said, "Oh, I don't know, a couple 100,000." And if you know Joel's story, he lives down 20 minutes away from the nearest town of 20,000 people down a dirt road.
Yeah.
Okay. He says, "What, 20,000 people?"
Yeah.
You just couldn't get over 20,000 people going past your front gate. You got to give them something to do.
Yeah.
And that's where Bite Glen came from.
Yeah, and it's a massive success now, isn't it?
Yeah. So originally they were looking at weddings, because the wool shed was right on the waterfront. You know? And through that, at one wedding, guy tapped him on the shoulder and says, "You're looking for investors for a bike park or something like that." And that's where it started.
Yeah.
And so, and that's another thing too, is that if you've got a business like that, suddenly you get exposed to a whole different class of people.
Yeah.
I was on a property not long ago where the guy has a hunting lodge, right? And they charge for whole families to go in there, right? And the people that go in there are usually successful business people. Many of them are retired. They've got an awful lot of wisdom about what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
You're mixing with these people.
Yeah. And
if you can pick up some of the principles there around success, then you can apply it to your business, right? And the thing is trying to be able to transfer those principles across. That's what requires the brain power.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing, right? So that's what you're looking for, are those opportunities, because it's in those little moments is where you get the ideas, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's a really important thing, especially if you're trying to grow, is mixing with people who are probably outside your circles, and probably a lot smarter as well, because they've done things that you want to do, and trying to learn off them and see how you can apply that to your business. And they don't have to be farmers, like you said. Like, running a business is actually fundamentally the same in all industries. I always hate the catch cry, but my business is different. It's not. We're all fundamentally the same.
Yeah.
So you can learn from anyone, but it's just trying to get around those people. And once you've got an opening like John McRae did, then it opens up all these other ideas, and you start having them yourself as well.
That's it. And you're mixing with a different group of people all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And all the guys in the book talk about this. They say, Al Myers, a classic, right?
Yeah.
And Al's as funny as a fight when you go and visit him because, he's got 250 bulls in one mob, okay, and he shifts them up to 8 times a day. And he'll be, talk to farmers out there. God, I don't have the time for that, oh, God, what an idiot, But he'll sit down and tell you, he'll say, look, I used to run 12 mobs of 20, and I'd shift them every 2 days because it would take me 2 days to get around them all.
Yeah.
So these days, I'm not worrying about broken gates, broken pipes, broken troughs, broken legs, okay, because they're all fully fed.
Yeah.
They're smoking in terms of what they do in terms of production, and life's a doddle.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I was there one day. He'd shifted them. What was it? 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was their 4th shift. It was I think a 60 or 70 metre break, and he didn't even have fence posts up between the breaks. Holding the wire up. He was just running the wire across the top of the chicken.
They've just been trained to.
They just wander their way around, and they'd have no problems with fighting and stuff because I mean, your missus will know, right?
Yeah.
You got a full stomach, mate. You're not up for anything. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's how well we keep control of us, right? That's why the best way to a man's heart's through the stomach.
Yeah.
Same with the bull, right?
Yeah.
Keep them full. They're not going to fight with anybody else, right? So that's how it works. So fully feeding is a real benefit to fully feeding.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of farmers are scared about doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Or don't understand how much they actually need to feed.
Yeah.
Or the way into graze to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
I guess like moving 8 times a day, that sounds crazy to probably most people.
Yep.
But because it's one big mob, and they're only moving probably not that far, it's actually not that bad, and he's probably got more time out the other end of it.
Well, that's it. I mean, he's still got other businesses to run. So, But the other thing is that, like he says, you can't hang out with the same people because they'll just tell you that you're crazy.
Yeah.
So you got to go find somebody else. You got to go and find some new friends. That's the hard bit.
Yes.
Right? Because you want to have a beer with your mates at the end of the week, but there's no point going there if they're going to tell you what you're doing as a waste of time.
Yeah.
You've got to pedal your own path.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to go and find some other people.
Yeah. So. Do you find like a lot of these guys in your book actually hang out or talk to each other quite regularly?
Oh, I mean, quite a few of them are on lots of Quorum Sense and those kinds of networks.
Yeah.
And so that's where you'll find them is there. And they all talk about going to a Quorum Sense day, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's what gets them started. And then it's just, this is the thing about social media. You can just approach anybody at any time,
Yeah.
And you put a photograph up and go, what would you do here?
Yeah, and you'll get a multitude of answers.
That's it. You'll find your friends. They come to you.
Yeah.
That's the beauty about social media, right? So, well, sooner or later, okay?
Yeah.
So, so that's what you can do is if you ask, you don't get, that's what it says in the Bible. It's there for a reason, So, you've got to go out there and ask for what you want.
Yeah.
And so that's why, mixing with the farmers and talking to other farmers is really, really useful, but you've got to find the right farmers.
Yes. Yeah. And that can be the hard problem, isn't it?
And that's why the book's there. So it gives you a bit of a heads up,
Yeah. There's probably also a bit of you stepping out of your comfort zone as well, because you're with your normal group of farmer mates and then you're going into this other one and you're kind of getting torn between the two. So it can be quite a jump.
Yeah.
I guess one thing that I wanted to talk about today was the art of observation. You've obviously got a fairly good idea about it, but I think it's an art that is becoming lost with farmers, and we always hear dig a hole, but you think it's more than that?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of Alan Savory's holistic management, right?
Yeah.
It gets you to look at the landscape because really all your pre-profit indicators are on the soil surface.
Yeah.
If you're looking at profit from the bank account, you're already too late.
Yeah.
And so what that's about is what's called landscape function.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that's how do you optimize the cycling of nutrients and water and the collection of sunlight and optimize the biodiversity for your business and the pasture, right? All those things, right? And a lot of that has to do with grazing management. Okay, so there's a relationship there. And so once you start understanding those relationships between how animals behave and how that influences the pastures and the soils, that gives you a far greater set of understandings around what you are doing on the landscape. Okay, so like I said before, if you understand that that your animals by the way of your grazing management are shifting all the fertility to the shelter belts, for example, then stop doing that. Is it okay? So change the way you do your management. Now there's a dozen different ways that you could do to make that work, right? You could fence off your shelter belts, for example, or you could do the night and day grazing I mentioned before. Or there's other ways of create other things in the middle of the paddock that animals will hang around, that kind of thing. Put a mineral feeder out there so it pulls them out, and they leave their business in that particular spot, and you shift around. Maybe you use multiple mobile troughs, for example. So there's lots of different things there around that fertility thing. But the big things are getting your infiltration rate up on your pasture. Okay, what's good is the perfect soil test if you got no moisture, and farmers farmers intuitively know this, that the soil surface governs how much water that they absorb. Okay, and that because if it hits the soil surface and runs off, okay, not only do you lose all that moisture, but chances are you're losing all your fertilizer as well. That's going down the road too, because remember, no fertilizer company guarantees that the fertilizer is going to stay where they put it, right? No. So that goes down the road. So if you've got a higher infiltration rate, then you're going to hold more moisture. You're going to have a longer growing season between rainfall events. You're going to reduce pests like slugs, for example, because the moisture levels will be on the soil surface will be lower. Okay. So all those kinds of things come into play. For a lot of farmers, it's the mineral the mineral cycle that's the problem. Yeah, it has to do with carbon, right? Yeah. Alan Nation makes this great observation. Alan Nation was the founding editor of the Stockman Grass Farm. He's got a whole lot of books, and they're some of my favourite books. And he talks in there. He says, what determines profit is carbon. He says, your carbon levels, yields are determined by carbon levels. Carbon levels are determined by how many years soil is in pasture, and that's determined by your grazing management. And I was talking to a guy in America, Dave Scott. He was an extension scientist for oodles of years with ATRA, which is the Appropriate Technology Organization in the States, right? And he was talking about he set up his bulky for fertilizer wrong, for putting on nitrogen fertilizer, and he ended up with these green strips in his pastures, right? And he goes, well, that's strange. It's only happening on that part of the farm, but nowhere else. And so he went and looked through his soil tests. He said, what I found was that where the organic matter levels were in double figures, I didn't have any stripes. But where it was in single figures, I had the stripes. Yeah. So from that day onward, he decided, well, there's no point me putting on nitrogen fertilizer if I can't see a difference on that part of the farm. So he decided not to put any more on the rest of the farm either. Yeah. So that was another expense he didn't have to worry about anymore. Exactly. Okay, because he couldn't see a difference, right? And so that was so those mineral views are really important. The other thing too is that as Dave Campbell points out in the book, you're entitled to a whole metre by the crown. Okay, you might as well use it all, not the top 7 centimetres, right? Yeah, use it all. So to get those roots down are a really important part of the mineral cycling, and that's why herbs and legumes are really important, because they go below 7 centimetres. Exactly. Okay, and the biodiversity things are really important too. And I was talking to a guy way up north, and he'd planted plantain, and I can't remember if it was a monocrop or whether it was part of a mix. But he said within 2 years he stopped having to copper his cattle, because the plantain was bringing up copper from deeper down. Okay, so that's where you get these. That's where you kind of get these little one-off things with farmers that they've noticed something as a result of doing something like that, but the industry won't pick up on it. You know? So that kind of thing. So these observations are I mean, the big thing is that where is the fertility gathering? And what are the plants that are indicating that's happening? Now, if I go into somebody's yards, you'll see mallow and goodness knows what else, right? But if I'm seeing that plant in the paddock, what's that telling me about that paddock versus the sheep yards, for example? Okay. Yeah. So that's so. As I say to people, if you look around the farm and see where how are the plants different in the gateways versus the paddock, for example? Because if you start seeing those plants out in the paddock, what's that telling you about your management? Exactly. That kind of thing. Because the plants in the Southland at the gateway are going to be different to here in Canterbury, different to what we find in Marlborough, let alone up in the Waikato, for example. They're all slightly different, right? But if you're finding those plants in your pasture, that's telling you you've probably got a compaction problem, right? Probably. Okay, so that kind of thing, right? Could be a sign,
Yeah, and weeds are a great sign.
of what's going on, you know.
Yeah, it's a very good indicator of what there's an issue there, and they're generally trying to solve it for you as well.
Yeah.
Whereas people are quick to spray them out, and
that's it,
without thinking, why is that actually there?
Yeah. I was talking the other day about California thistles, and I said, well, do what the organic guys do. They just go through and bruise them all, turn the lambs in 3 days later, because the bruising lifts the sugar levels up.
Yeah.
Those lambs will clean those things up, boom, like that. I said, they're like lollies.
Yeah.
And they're gone, you know?
Yeah. And it sorts it out pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah. So that the observation thing is, there's more to it than digging a hole.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a lot more to it than that. So there's, the more that the farmer can see when they're walking or driving across their pasture, then the more in tune they are with their grazing management and how their grazing management is influencing the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I normally finish all my podcasts with a couple of questions that I ask everyone. So the first one is, what was one thing you'd change about the agricultural industry? It's a big one.
I think that it'll be to do with training, and in particular, the role of agroecology in farm management. Okay, I think that there's a real lack of understanding about how ecology fits into farm management. I mean, we're not talking, kiwis and stuff like that, the biodiversity, the doc stuff. We're talking about basic understanding of soil, plant, animal relationships that are not conveyed very well in farm management. Yeah. And the result of that is seen everywhere across the country, everywhere. Yeah. Right? So that's probably the thing that I'd like to see change.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. Looking back at your younger self, what's one bit of advice you give yourself?
Patience.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, things take a long time to change. So, I mean, people, if you, another way of asking that question might be, what would have you done differently? Well, it's really hard to say I could have done something differently. Like I said before, I've never got a job through an interview, ever.
Yeah.
So, that's your way into the industry, right? Yeah. So there's no way I was going to get into the industry, right? So there's always someone, that had better skills or better experience or whatever that got there first, right? So there's not much I'd change going forward. Looking back, it's just what can I do from now on? That's the most important thing. Yeah. And that's why I wrote the book, was to help with that. So, and to let people know that there are people making changes out there that are successful. Yes. And you can go and find these people. They're out there, It's not that hard. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're happy to share their wins and losses along the way.
So I mean, farmers are like that, okay? Yeah. Once you get past the crustiness and all the rest of it, right? Because, I mean, I'm not a farmer, so it's a challenge for them, for me to be sitting at their table. But once they get past that, then, they're incredibly generous with their knowledge and their observations and their time, incredibly generous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And if you could have dinner with any one person, who would it be and why?
What about Jeremy Clarkson?
Yeah.
I sent him a copy of my book, and he was one of the few people, or it was PA was one of the few people that got back to me and said, thank you very much for going to all that trouble. Because and again, in some regards, he's in a really privileged position because he can get away with so much, from the traditional farmer point of view. He's Jeremy Clarkson, he wouldn't know a thing about farming, right?
Yeah.
So that's why he can buy, do the stuff.
Cash, it's always the catch cry.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, right? But, the experiences that he talks about and deals with are the same as every other farmer. The frustration of dealing with bureaucracy, and not just what the rules are, but the people you've got to deal with and how the rules are applied. That's the drama, right? And it would be interesting to hear, because I don't watch this program or nothing, but I mean, it'd be interesting to hear, what his experience are with farming and just what his thoughts are going forward, and what he thinks that whether he'll stay farming.
Yeah,
is it that challenging? Yeah, is it that challenging that he would want to leave? And because I mean, like, he's creating so much publicity around the reality for farmers.
Yeah,
I mean, he could be like a lot of other British TV presenters and come here and live here in New Zealand. There's a few of them have done that.
Yeah,
so he can come and find out. That could be the next thing for him.
Yeah.
And so, you can come and farm here and be the mouthpiece for, New Zealand farmers here because, there's a lot to be unhappy about here in terms of what farmers are dealing with. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's probably what he's done so well was actually being able to articulate that in a way that everyone understands. Like,
yeah. And still be a goof, get away with it. That's the thing. Is so there's this is the thing is that we talked a minute ago about the guys that do businesses that attract other people from other professions into their farms. This is the benefit of that kind of thing, right? Is that you get access to those kind of people that have got different ideas, different energy, different outlooks, and that's what and that brings with it opportunity.
Yeah.
And the trouble is find the right one for you, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's different, right? So not everybody wants Jeremy Clarkson at their dinner table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there are other people out there, and it's just trying to find them or trying to attract them to you is the big thing. So you got to figure out that.
Yeah, exactly. And since we've been talking all about farming, what's your favourite thing to cook? Because it's been steak for most people, which is a surprise.
I mean, I'm a red meat eater.
Red meat, yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing special.
Nothing special, just basic. Bit of salt.
Yeah.
That's it, really. I'm not into sauces and all that kind of stuff. That's just, in fact, I prefer it blue.
Blue, yeah.
If it ain't shivering when it comes off the barbecue, it might be a bit overdone. Better put it back. So I live on a really basic diet.
Yeah.
And my ancestors from Scotland, apparently we farmed at the same place for 600 years. I'm pretty sure they'd be just happy with steak and turnips, that kind of thing, right? So
good whole foods.
So just whole foods. I'm not into processed foods. I stay away from all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
that's where most of your health problems come from.
Exactly.
And try to keep some exercise up, and that's it, really. So yeah,
nice. And for all the listeners, where's the best place to get in touch with you or connect? I'll put links to your book and whatnot. But
yep. So they can contact me through my email address is usually the best.
Yeah.
Okay. My curiosity clubs are always looking for properties to go and visit, and we're always looking for members to come and join us. So it's only $500 for a year. And it's 4 meetings a year. Plus, I try to do a webinar every month with someone that's interesting in the industry.
Cool.
Okay. And so that's basically the easiest way to get in contact with me is through email.
Yeah.
I run groups from Southland to Northland, because the beauty about that, I'm probably one of the few people that do that, is that you get to see how the principles are applied in different places.
Absolutely.
And what are the outcomes from those different places. So. And you get a wider variety of you get that real national perspective about what works and what doesn't,
Yeah.
And it's surprising just how many things apply almost everywhere. So
yeah.
It's really interesting. It's not just you and your place; it actually works somewhere else. So
yeah,
that kind of story too. Yeah.
And that helps give confidence in the principles again.
Yeah.
It's just that never-ending cycle, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on today. I've really enjoyed today's chat. I think I found someone who's very like-minded in my thinking as well. So thank you for your time today, John.
No, it's been a pleasure, Conan. It's been an absolute pleasure.